Welcome to Transformation with Martine. Conquer everything and compromise nothing. This show brings you real, raw, and vulnerable conversations. If you have never liked small talk and have been on a personal growth journey for a long time, stay tuned as Martine and her guests share empowering stories. Now is the time to own your past and look toward your future with hope. Believe in your dreams, and all that you want to achieve is possible. Transformation Coach Martine helps you accept and love you for you. It's time to listen to your heart and tap into your unlimited potential. You have the answers you need inside. Sometimes you just need the right guide to help allow transformation to happen. Transformation with Martine starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to Transformation with Martine. This is where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. Happy Friday. So happy to see all of you or be here with all of you and share good stories. This is where we have real, raw, vulnerable conversations and organic conversations. This is not a scripted place. So welcome and happy Friday again. So I want to welcome my guest today. He and I are both part of a 3-book anthology, and this is the second book that he is in. And he and I have something in common, and it's not something that you want to go through or anything you really want to be a part of the club with. But I wanted to invite him on the show because of his journey that is very similar to mine. So welcome, Phil.
Hey, Martine, thank you. Thank you. Good to be with you, my friend.
Absolutely. It's awesome to have you here. So, Phil, when we were talking, about our stories and the book we are part of is Win the War on Wellness, that was written by all of us co-authors and Peggy Williams and Dr. Marcus Wetstein. And we are both honored to be a part of it. And so what we have in common is, unfortunately, dementia. My mother had dementia and his brother had dementia. And I thought it was with you, Phil, it's really my mom, it was really a hard thing, but I know with your brother, it's got to be really hard too, because there's a sibling thing. It's a connection. My mom, yes. I know it was coming for years. I'm not sure if you knew it was coming for years, but I think if it was my siblings that had that would be even harder, I think.
Yeah, I will say this to you, Martine. I absolutely had no idea that it was coming. Mm-hmm. And I think what I did know in regards to my brother's health, and, by the way, for listeners, my mother had 3 boys. And so both of my brothers have passed away. And I guess you could call me a designated survivor, and certainly one of those forgotten mourners in this whole process. But my brother's illness is something that actually started with being a diabetic. And when my brother made the decision, I don't know that, when we make decisions in our life, we make those decisions based on the information that we either got through research or some decisions that we make through the stories that we make up in our head. And then we just make those decisions and we do what we think is best for us. And my brother did what he thought was best for him. And so when he made the decision in regards to the insulin and how it was making him feel, I think in that instance, when one makes the decision that this is something that I don't want to do anymore, I don't have diabetes anymore, I've lost all of the weight that I needed to lose, there has to be a scheduled weaning from that. You don't just stop. And so when you do stop, then you become susceptible to things like a stroke. And so my brother did suffer a stroke. And I think through the stroke process, from my understanding, and I could have this wrong from a medical perspective, and that is that there's some plaque that begins to build up in the brain. And so then the offshoot of that is dementia. Specifically, what kind, was it frontal, where exactly where it was, that I'm not sure. I definitely know there was a medical diagnosis of that. And so as that began to evolve, what was really interesting, Martine, and I don't know if I shared this with you, I remember taking my brother to a doctor's appointment. It was just a regular checkup. And we were in the car and he said something to me. And a few minutes later, he repeated it. And then he repeated it again. And he finally said to me, and he called me by my middle name, which is Todd. He says, I really think something is wrong with me. And it was at that point where I then had the realization, then it's time to find that out. And so he was able to find that out along with his family, meaning his wife and his kids. And so, that was the diagnosis. And so from that space of finding out and then realizing that it's not going to get any better, it just progressed into a space where, the family could not rest well at night because my brother would just get up in the middle of the night and leave. And so that was unsafe for him. Emotionally, it was a tug for all of us. And so you wonder, where is somebody in the middle of the night when they're not where they're supposed to be? So yeah, it was something that I didn't know. When I moved home to Florida, it was something that didn't happen immediately, but I think shortly thereafter, then the diagnosis came about, and it was just something that we had to deal with. Yeah.
Right. So him stopping the insulin, you think is what forwarded something that maybe already could have been there? Or I mean, we're not doctors, obviously, but
Right. I think when you stop insulin or when you stop taking any medication and you don't consult with your doctor,
Mhm.
then the body does what it does, whether it is accustomed to having the insulin for the balancing or whether it's accustomed to having, medication to reduce cholesterol, anything that you take that under the doctor's orders, and then you stop without consulting the doctor. I think we're all susceptible to whatever the possibilities could be. And again, my family has a history of diabetes, and I have seen where family members have made the decision to no longer take the insulin because of how it made them feel, really without consulting the doctor. And then something would happen. And so I think we have to have conversations with our care providers and talk to our primary care providers or a specialist that you work with. Just having that conversation before you make a decision that may not be in your best interest.
Right, right. I don't know if he was stubborn like my mother was, and my mom, it was a different circumstance. It was just like we noticed over probably about 10 years before it happened that something was happening.
Mhm.
And then we all, I mean, this isn't anything that anybody said, but we kind of came to the conclusion she had there was a car accident and it
Mhm.
was a pileup, you know,
Okay.
and they were at a dead stop and then somebody, hit my dad and, on. And she was never the same. And it was like there was a point, even my dad and I were talking about it the other day, that there was a point where I knew that my mom was not my mom anymore. She was
Yeah.
still a loving person and all that, but unless you had something, um, well, like positive stuff going on, like I can't go to mom for advice anymore. Something had
Right.
changed.
Right.
And then over the years, just things just, gosh, just she knew who everybody was, but it was things she would stop doing. Like she had friends that she'd had since what she called, and now it's elementary school now, I guess, but grammar school is what she called it. And she said that I mean she had these friends all her life, and they were doing a get together, and she didn't want to go. That's not my
Wow.
mom, you
Yeah.
know. And when she started saying stuff like that, and we're like, okay, something's really wrong here. But then when she started accusing my dad of affairs and things, then it's like, oh, okay, what is going on here?
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. There
yeah.
is a change. The change happens. And
Mm,
like you said, the person no longer becomes the person that you once knew. You
yeah.
still love them, but they're not the same. And it's almost like they're trapped in their own bodies. I think I've used that phrase with you before. It's you're trapped, and how do you get out of that? Yeah.
Scary, isn't it?
It's beyond scary. I think I can't imagine it happening to me and how I would feel, but just being on the other end, as a person that I guess you could say in receipt of that, it's like that's not the same person that I knew that was my hero. And my hero, although he was still my hero changed. And he was not even communicating that much anymore. But it was that constant asking the same questions and then thinking that he was still employed. And so it was just a whole lot of interpersonal things that we knew about each other, that I think it's that long-term memory, and the short-term memory that kind of fizzles in and out.
Do you fear, I mean, you talked about diabetes being in your family. Do you fear this happening to you?
So I have had a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, and what I am very well aware of is that the regimen that I'm on, that it works. And I'm determined to stay on that regimen. And my resolution is I want to live a long and prosperous life. And I think to do that, I think my noodle has got to stay on straight. And so, I am very well aware of that. I'm not afraid of it, but knowing what can happen if I don't stay on the regimen. And that is really important to me. I am resolved to do that.
I have a question for that. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine, where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. My guest today is Phillip Williams, and we are talking about dementia. We are talking about the book that we are both in, a fabulous anthology all about winning the war on wellness. And we were talking on the break and a little bit before we left, and I asked Phillip if his brother's diagnosis and diabetes leading to, or he's thinking that it is part of what caused the dementia, if he furthered his resolve in regards to staying healthy himself. So do you want to share more now with the audience?
Sure. So my resolve, or I think I'll use that word, self-efficacy, to kind of describe that capacity, Martine. One of the things that I think is really important is to understand that when you educate yourself about something, that when you have an understanding of something, in that sense, you can then better manage if that should ever happen. And so when my brother's diagnosis of dementia was there, I then began to think, what led up to that? What caused that for him? So again, my conclusion, and I'm again not a medical doctor and no expertise in that space, but what I know from history is just watching him no longer do what was manageable to do. And so and my caveat to that is, I don't blame him for that. I just really don't, because again, we make decisions based on the best information that we have, or the best information that we seek out. And so from my perspective, there is no fear there. I don't have any hesitation about living my life. I just know that once you know something, you can't say that you don't know it. Or once you learn something, you don't unlearn it. And so for me, knowing what my efficacy is, or my self-efficacy is, the capacity to understand and to educate myself about what's happening with my body, I think is really the big thing. Is again, when you know something, you can't unknow it. And So that was really important for me and has been important for me. And just again, my brother's whole experience is a reminder that if you don't stay on your regimen, there's that possibility. There's a possibility of a whole lot of things that can happen. And so I just want to be the best Phil that I can possibly be. And to do that, if that means that I have to take medication or that I have to exercise and do something different so that I have a better quality of life, then I'm going to do that because it's important for me. That's my resolve, is to be the best that I can be. Because when you really think about it, while we think we're living our lives for ourselves, and indeed in some ways we really are living our lives to be a blessing for someone else. And so I want to be that. And to be that, I have to be healthy. I just don't, and this is just my own personal and probably perhaps religious belief, but I just don't think that I can be of benefit to someone if I'm ill. And so I want to be a benefit. I want to be a blessing to someone. And so I'm going to stay as healthy as I possibly can.
I agree. And, everybody does have their own path, you
Yeah.
know, and if somebody, like my father does have diabetes, he won't touch medications. He's got the neuropathy on his legs. He's got a belly of, it's kidney failure, but he won't put chemicals in his body. And it's not like it's a thinking that's definitely not like mine. And it's causing memory problems and issues, but he's got to do his thing. He's got to do his path. But I believe that as well, that we should take care of ourselves. We were given this vessel by God, right? We're supposed to take care of it. We're supposed to take care of ourselves. And, sure, we can have some fun and have an ice cream or whatever, but we do need to take care of ourselves and be the best we can for ourselves, for others around us. And, like you were mentioning that you don't have any fear of the illness. I do, but only for the fact that my mother was diagnosed with dementia. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I fear it especially because my grandmother, nobody really knew what was going on then either. That was a long time ago. And she just shut down because everybody made fun of her.
Mm.
That scares me. Like, I don't want to be a burden to somebody, and I don't want to feel bad because of something I can't control. So it is something I fear. But I figure, well, I've told my kids, I've told my husband, I really want to be put somewhere should this happen to me.
Right.
I don't want to be a burden to anybody. And I don't want to be like my mother taken off in the middle of the night, like your brother as well.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah. And what's interesting, you talked about your grandmother and her silence.
Yeah.
And I just believe that, and I don't know the years, and I have it written down somewhere, just don't have it in front of me. But that's, to me, that feels like that's part of the silent generation. And the silent generation just didn't talk about a whole lot of things. I remember my grandmother being a diabetic, and this is a really funny story. My hero, my brother, my grandmother instructed my brother to go to the local public grocery store in our town, and she wanted a whole chocolate cake. And so my brother brings home the chocolate cake, and my mother, who was also a diabetic, said to her mother, my grandmother, you shouldn't be eating that, right? So my grandmother says, in her own polite and kind and compassionate Southern way, said, I think you forget who the parent here is, and you don't get to tell me what to do. And so it was so interesting, and it was funny because I watched my grandmother sort of deal with my mother, who in her own right was a strong woman. But what was interesting about that, Martine, is my grandmother took a very small slither of that cake, and she gave the rest of it to the grandkids. And it's like, wow, what a huge bit of drama just for a little slice of cake. But we, the grandkids, we enjoyed that. And so I watched that dynamic between the adults. And certainly, my brother was 16 years older than me. And so to watch that, and how whatever my grandmother said, my brother would do, and then my mother would get involved. It's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And my grandmother would remind her, I'm your mother. You don't get to tell me what to do. So
Yeah.
interesting dynamic. And when you talked about your grandmother, it just makes me think of that silent generation. And
Mhm.
they just didn't talk about these things. And I think now we have a responsibility to talk about these things, Martine, in a way that it can educate somebody, but it can say, "Oh, yeah, that's happened to me," and I'm not the only one that it's happened to because so often we can create the story in our head that we're the only ones, and we're not. It's happening to a whole lot of people.
It is. And that's the
Mhm.
thing about, us and sharing our stories, this book and people speaking on podcasts like this, people speaking up, then, it shows that, nobody's really alone. There are
Yeah.
so many things going on that people are going through.
So many, so many things are going on. People are going through so many things.
Mhm.
And what I found out through just living my own life is again, I'm not the only one that's dealing with it. And
Mhm.
at the same time, if I don't talk about it, that story that gets created in my head
Mhm.
can lead down a path that is just, it doesn't make any sense. And so here's an example. Just last week, I was thinking, I'm in this PhD program. I'm a year and a half into it. And is this really the right thing for me? I was feeling just some kind of way about it.
Mhm.
And I got an email from the university president and the dean that said, "Congratulations, you made the dean's list." And I thought,
Wow.
oh, I was ready. I was ready to stop. And
Right.
it was so enlightening that to have this message come across email as, congratulations, and you made the dean's list. And
Mhm.
just made me stop and say, I was just about to abandon something that I really wanted
Yeah.
because of some story that I created in my head. And so I think these kind of podcasts and sharing this kind of information, whether it's about family or about ourselves and about our experiences, it really does help other people in this life because, you know, it's sometimes it can just really be a very lonely journey and you don't think anybody else is dealing with that but you, and it's just not the case.
Mhm. Yep. You know, um, Speaking of like not thinking nobody else is with you, I think one of the hardest things in illness, whether it's dementia or cancer or whatever it might be, is, the caregiver's role. It's a tough one,
Mhm. It
you
is.
know? Yeah. I don't know how much of a part. I know you were, at least to a certain extent, with your brother and me and my mom. I don't know how my dad did it by himself for as long as he did,
Mhm.
you know? Because like when I took over for him, he almost like he feels like he slept for 2 months after that. You know, it's
Yeah,
a lot. Oh,
that
it's
caregiver part,
mm,
that that is a whole lot. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. You really have to almost put your life on hold as a caregiver. And
oh,
then, as someone said to me just yesterday, take care of you too. You can't
mm,
forget about yourself because I've been there not only just with my brother, but my sister-in-law and my brother's family was involved in the whole
mhm,
process. Thankfully I didn't have that all by myself. And
right.
at the same time, my former pastor, when he had cancer, I was part of the caregiving team with his family. And I didn't notice, Martine, that I had lost like 20 pounds. And my pastor's sister said, "Have you looked at yourself lately?" And it's like, no, go look at yourself in the mirror. And I had become so drawn and my clothes weren't fitting right. And it's like, I
Mhm,
am just not taking care of myself because as a caretaker, you forget about yourself.
yep,
You you be you you become that forgotten caretaker, I guess if I can add a
yeah,
phrase to that.
yep. That is
Yeah.
totally true. Because I know when I got my mom, I mean, my youngest was 7 and I had 10, 13. And then we're a blended family. So my husband had a 10 and a 13-year-old too. And trying to handle them and her,
Mm.
it was a lot. It was a lot.
It makes for a busy schedule, right?
Oh my goodness. Yes. And you really never, you can't, in that time period, I don't know how I managed really anything at a quick shower,
Mhm.
that was a very hard time. We're going to take a quick break and then we will come back and talk some more about wellness and taking care of ourselves. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine, where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. My guest today is Phillip Williams, and we are talking about our book, the second book in a three-part anthology and this one's all about winning the war on wellness. And Phillip's chapter is called The Forgotten Mourner. So this is about your brother, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I've read it. I just confirming with you. But I was touched by that, especially not just because of our common ground with dementia, but I am alone now as well. It's just me and my dad. My siblings are gone. And there have been times where I just kind of wonder, like, geez, why did I have to lose them? It's just me and my dad. And did you ever feel that way? Like, why was your brother's taken? And like,
I did, Martin. What's so interesting about this is my oldest brother, of course, was my hero, still is my hero.
mhm.
My middle brother, while we didn't get along, our relationship was not as strong as my older brother. He was still my brother, and I still loved him,
Yeah.
no less. And so the middle brother passed away first, and I think I felt numb, but not. I, I wasn't as emotional as I was when my hero passed away,
Yeah.
and so I often think, why me? Because I remember, Martine, I remember being on the just at the threshold of death, having experienced something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, not knowing that I was allergic to penicillin,
Oh, wow.
treating what we thought was or felt like was bronchitis because I had this deep-seated cough. And they asked the question, "Are you allergic to penicillin?" Well, I've had it before, and so I said no. Well, my body said, "Well, I don't think I like that anymore," and so it just began to burn itself out of my body, but it from the inside out. And so what that means is your skin sloughs and it literally pulls away from your flesh, and
Wow.
it's the most disturbing thing to see. It feels awful, it smells awful, it's a very painful process. And my brother said to me he thought that I had come home to die, and I was determined, well, I'm not going to die. And I remember in my, I don't know if it was a semi-comatose stage I was in, my brother was talking to the doctor, and he said, well, it's generally it's a 730 survival rate. And so I thought, right then, I'm getting out of here. I just don't want to pass away this way. So fast forward, and my brother getting dementia and the things that he had to deal with and organs shutting down. And then he passes away. And the day that it happened, I remember saying to myself, am I now an orphan? I don't know. Am I feel alone. I I I just don't know what to think about this. And my parents are gone, both my siblings are gone, and it's like, what is that all about? And it came to me, oh, probably several days later after that. And the two words that was really deep in my spirit was designated survivor. And I thought, okay, I think I can live with being the designated survivor. You still ask the question, why? And so just recently, in the last couple of months, my why was answered and being designated for a destination. I don't know what that destination is. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I just know that I'm on the journey to whatever that destination is. And all of the things, whether it's education, whether it's my profession, whether it's the relationships that I have, whether it's the new people that I will connect with, because I don't like the word networking, but all of those things I think are attached to the designation. So yeah, being the forgotten mourner piece for me was I spent all of that time helping other people around my brother's death, you know, whether it was his children, you know, consoling with my brother's wife, my cousins, friends that knew him. And then it dawned on me at some point, you forgot about yourself, Phil. What are you doing for yourself? Because I think I know for me, being a helper or helping other people or wanting to see other people be successful, I can't tell you that it's my first thought to see myself being successful. And so that piece of forgetting about myself is really where my story comes from, as being the forgotten mourner and helping everybody else, but not doing anything to help myself. So that's really the gist of my story with that.
Right. So what would you tell somebody that would be like you and me, you know, without siblings now? I do have my dad. My mom's been gone since 2014. What would you say to someone else who's in our position, just thinking like, you know, I love the designated survivor. I love that. What would you say to someone else who is
I
kind
would
of
tell anyone that's experiencing this, and by the way, I've tried to reach out to some friends that I know that are designated survivors, that are the only surviving sibling. I would just share with someone in that position that to remember to, number one, to take care of yourself. Don't forget about yourself, but more importantly, understand that grief just does not have an expiration. And 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 I know for me, and one of my favorite places to be with my mom, and even one of my favorite places to be with my brother, was my brother would, when he was much younger, he and his girlfriends, I always thought that when he went out on Friday nights, I was supposed to go with him. I don't know why I thought that, but anyway, so I think I would get mad, and my brother was very sensitive to me, and every Saturday morning, I would have this waxed paper bag of 3 glazed donuts. And it was just, I think, his way of saying, I'm sorry, and it's gonna happen again, and I'm sorry. So whenever I get a chance to have a glazed donut, I think about my brother. And then with my mom, and where that grief comes in with her is, I could be in my kitchen cooking something, because my mother and I used to prepare meals together. And she would tell me, you know, you don't need to turn the fire on high when you cook eggs, because eggs are protein and they get tough on you. And it's like, okay, I got it. And so when I do things like that, it reminds me of the stories that my mother used to tell me. So when you are in this position, just know that grief just does not have an expiration date. And it comes in those moments when you least expect it. And I would just tell you, deal with it. Go through that grief. It's a process, but there is a positive about it. At some point, you will find that it doesn't hurt as much as it used to. And that's the thing for me, is it just does not hurt as much. But when it comes and it hits me, I get reminded of the stories, I get reminded of the situations, and oftentimes when it does happen, I'm glad that I'm by myself because
Right.
then I can cry and be ugly and nobody has to remind me that I'm ugly and while I'm crying.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, she actually gives herself time. Like she knows like when anniversaries are coming up or whatever it is, she actually books that time. She may
Okay.
go to an Airbnb, she may go to a hotel, whatever it is, and just get out of her circumstances and go somewhere else and just take that time. And then she
Mhm.
sets a timeline on it. Okay, on this date, I'm done,
Yeah.
but she gives herself to do whatever she needs to do in that time.
And that's
And I
so
think that's
important to do
helpful.
what works
Mhm,
best for you.
mhm.
And that's the thing is grief is it is not a corporate concert. It is a very
So,
individual thing. And
yep.
no matter who you are, where you are, what time of day it is, it can come in a dream. It can wake you up in the middle of the night because it's happened to me where my mother is on my mind. And I'll tell you this real quick story before we end. I
Sure.
remember I used to be a salesperson for Sears Roebuck, and I was in the department that sells ceiling fans, and this lady comes up behind me and she says, "Excuse me." And I turn around, my TA, and she looks almost like my mother. And it's
Oh
like,
my gosh.
I froze. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I am, but I'm going to have to get somebody else to help you." And I had to get off the floor because it was just right soon after my mom had passed away. And so I think that was back in 1979, 1980. And so it's been a long time. I was 17 years old when my mom passed away. So it's been 40 plus years. And
Oh,
so the grief still happens, as again, that's why I say it has no expiration date at all.
it doesn't. No,
Yeah.
it does not. Okay. It's yeah. And like you said, we have to honor ourselves and we have to go through it however we're going to go through it. And whatever anybody tells you that, oh, you should be through that by now, it's like, hey,
If
there's
anybody tells you that,
things.
run
Yeah,
away from that person.
exactly.
Don't stick around because that
Mhm.
doesn't help you. It's not supporting you when
No,
you're in those moments. So
no,
yeah, don't
ab-
stick around. Yeah.
absolutely not. All right, we will be right back, everyone, with final thoughts and all that good stuff. We'll see you in a few. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine, where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. We've been having a good old time today. Phillip Williams and I have been talking about grief, about dementia, and just taking time for ourselves in the space of grief, of losing our siblings, mom. It's definitely a journey. So we were talking about in the break a little while back was about purpose and how having a purpose not only it keeps you youthful, but it keeps you going through life's journey of so many things that happen in our lives and things that we have to go through, and it's really good to keep that purpose, that why, in front of you at all times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I read an article once and it said something about purpose being, and I think I wrote it down right, the central motivating aim in your life. And so I think that's really profound. It's a very powerful statement, and it connects itself to my purpose. And again, knowing and having been subject to so much loss in my family, and even with you losing so much in your family, I think we have to have a purpose. It helps us to get up in the mornings. And so when I think about my purpose, and I do have it written down in front of me, it is just to stay in touch with the joy that brings me to the table. So,
Mm.
what is that joy for me? The joy is, even in this program for you, for this to be a success, for people to hear this with your program and with your podcast. And my practice in human resources is for people to be um, to be engaged, for them to feel as an employer that they are the employer of choice as an employee, to feel motivated to do the jobs that they do. For my family, you know, purpose of just being there when I can. And when someone picks up the phone and say, hey, here's what's happening. And so, you know, just to share with the audience, on yesterday, I got a phone call that my brother's two oldest children from his first wife, that the brothers, both of them suffered a heart attack within 24 hours of each other. And so now they're in the hospital and they're holding their own. And so all I could do was be on the other end of the phone and listen. As an uncle, I can just listen. And, you know, in my private time, I can pray for them. But having that purpose, I really think, is pretty much like we were talking on the break earlier, Martine, in regards to our bodies, that they are designed to be on the move. That's why we have legs and feet to take one step in front of the other. And having a purpose also supports the idea of taking one step at a time, and, you know, putting one foot in front of the other. And so, again, my why is just staying in touch with the joy that brings me to the table. It's a central motivating aim for me in my life. And so I think having that really does, I guess you could say, it does a body good. It certainly does my mind good, because it helps me to really stay in touch with a whole lot of things, because all of my relationships are very intentional, and I don't do anything, I don't say anything that I don't mean, or that's without intention. I've come too far in life not to have that, not to have a why, and not to have a purpose.
Oh, absolutely. Purpose is definitely what keeps us going, like you were just saying. It is.
Mhm.
You know, I can't imagine just I mean, there are days where it seems like you kind of waffle, but you know, about thoughts of what are you going to do or whatever it is in certain circumstances, but there's always that why, the thing of why you want to do it. You may not sure exactly what path to go down, but there's that why. And I
Yeah.
can't imagine not having that. It's the same as not having God, you know, to
Yes.
me. I've
Yes.
got to have that faith. I've got to have something that is a bigger than me, and walking towards the steps. For me, it's helping others, it's coaching others, it's getting people's powerful messages on the stages and uplifting people's lives like this show. That's everything
Right.
to me.
Yeah. And I want this to be very successful for you. And so it was really an honor when you reached out to me to be a part of this. And it's like, yes, let's do this, because again, it has a purpose. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping that it motivates someone, that it creates um, some kind of motivation to get up, to do something, to say that you're going to do something, to remind yourself that maybe there is something that you love to do, that there is a hobby that you may have had that you no longer take part in, and just kind of hopefully motivate those things again for you as an individual. And I certainly, again, know for me, my motivation is, you know, to finish this degree program. And not that I'm looking for anybody to call me Dr. Phil. That is not what I'm looking for.
Yes, Dr. Bell.
This is very personal for me, because my siblings didn't go to college. My mother, I think, barely made it to the 6th grade. But what was so interesting about her making it to the 6th grade, her penmanship was like, whoa. I mean, she could really write a letter, and you could read it. And she was an avid reader. And at one point, I couldn't stand reading. And so now it's like I'm trying to soak it all up in whatever period of time that I have. But that's a central motivating theme for me. And my hope is that everybody who is listening, that you will find whatever that motivating theme is for you, and that you'll make it happen. And if if you need some motivation to get motivated, hopefully this conversation that I'm having today will help you be motivated with that, because it's important to have a purpose.
It is absolutely to have a purpose. And like you were talking about too, is it being intentional, being intentional with your purpose, being intentional about taking steps every day, being intentional with who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely.
People that are motivating. It's like I was there's a person that I follow on social media, and I like to see his posts, and he always talks about finding somebody that can mentor you. Don't talk to your family about certain things. Family's great, but there are certain things where you got to talk to somebody who has gone before you.
Yeah,
They can guide you so much better.
And that is a boundary, and the boundary isn't for the other person, it's for you.
Yeah.
And so my boundary is Wednesday and Thursday nights, that's class time for me. Friday, I'm finishing up all my reading. My introduction is done. Saturday, I'm finishing this whole thing out. And Mondays, I do absolutely nothing. And so from that perspective, it is that's the boundary for me. But even in that boundary, having a purpose and knowing what at the end of this specific journey, from an academic standpoint, again, I'm not looking to be called Dr. Phil, but what I am looking for is to complete what I started. And that's really important for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. That is great. And I look forward to calling you Dr. Phil, and you're a rock star. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. It's been a
This has been a tremendous pleasure on a happy Friday.
Yes.
It's no longer raining in the Atlanta area. The sun is out. And so I think it's a good day.
It is a good day. It's a beautiful day. Yeah. Especially when you connect with people of like minds and we're wanting to do something to serve.
Yes. And the magic word to me is connect. When you can connect with others, I'll say this real quickly. I have this thing, Strength Finders. It says that I'm a woo, winning others over. And it's not winning them over for them to like me, but it's winning others over to find that connection and have some common ground.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Oh, thank you. This was my pleasure.
And
we'll have to do this again.
We will, absolutely. And thank you everyone so much for tuning in. And we hope that we have brought some light into your world today, and that you go forward on your purpose. And we will see you next week, next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you so much.
Great Friday.
Thank you for tuning in to Transformation with Martine, real, raw, and vulnerable conversations. Listen or watch live every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on transformationtalkradio.com, as Martine and her guests have deep, meaningful conversations, sharing empowering stories. Step into your passions and lead with your heart. If you are ready to accept and love you for you, visit martineemmons.com and start allowing transformation to happen today.